So the chancellors just dropped the 2025 budget. And you know, amidst all the political chatter and big headlines, there's really only one question that truly matters to you and me. Are we going to have more or less money in our pockets at the end of the month? Today, we're cutting through all that noise to break down the real-world impact on your finances. We're talking about the wins, the losses, and those sneaky little details that are going to affect you the most.
And this, right here, is the big question, isn't it? Has this new budget quietly started nibbling away at your take-home pay? When that next payslip comes through, are you actually going to be better off or worse off? You know, the answer isn't a simple yes or no, because the budget has brought in some pretty subtle but really powerful changes. So let's dig in and find out exactly what they are.
Now, to help us make sense of all of this, we're using a fantastic, detailed analysis put together by the experts over at My Tax Accountant. They've gone through today's budget announcement with a fine-tooth comb to give us a clear, practical picture of what it all means for the average taxpayer right here in the UK.
So, here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll look at your money right after the 2025 budget. Then we'll dive into the main story, a thing called fiscal drag. After that, we'll celebrate your budget wins, but then we've got to look at the losses. We'll finish up with the key numbers you need to know, and importantly, how you can get some expert help.
Okay, let's get straight into it. Section 1. Your money after the 2025 budget. I want you to just imagine for a second that first pay slip landing on your doormat or in your inbox after these changes kick in. What's it actually going to look like?
Well, at first glance, you might think, not much has changed. The main income tax rates are staying the same. Your personal tax-free allowance, still £12,570. But, and this is a big but, the key detail here is the word frozen. These numbers, these thresholds are now frozen solid until 2031. And that freeze, well, that's the real secret to understanding this budget's true impact on your wallet.
And you know, that freeze leads us directly to the biggest story of this budget. Welcome to Section 2, Fiscal Drag. You've probably heard this called a stealth tax in the news, and for very good reason. So let's break down exactly what it is and, more importantly, why it matters so much right now.
Okay, so here's how fiscal drag works in the real world. Let's say your pay goes up to help you keep pace with the rising cost of living. But at the same time, the tax goalposts, those thresholds, they don't move. They're stuck. So that pay rise can actually push you into a higher tax bracket, or it just means that more of your salary gets taxed at your current rate. The result? You're earning more money on paper, but a bigger slice of it is going straight to the tax man. So your actual spending power, the money you have for bills and groceries, it doesn't really increase.
And look, we are not talking about small change here. Because of this deep freeze on tax thresholds, HMRC is on track to collect an extra £26 billion by the 2029-30 tax year. That is a staggering amount of money, and it's coming directly from taxpayers' pockets, all without the government having to officially raise a single tax rate. It's pretty clever, really.
This chart really shows you the problem visually. You can see the squeeze right there. Imagine average wages are growing by, say, 3% just to keep up with inflation. But then you look at the tax thresholds, and they're growing at 0%. That gap, that's the squeeze. That's where more and more of your hard-earned income becomes taxable every single year. And stay with me, because who this affects the most might just surprise you.
And don't just take my word for it. Analysis from the Office for Budget Responsibility shows that while higher earners will contribute the most to this extra tax revenue, it's absolutely not just a tax on the wealthy. If your income is anywhere near that £50,270 basic rate limit, even a modest pay rise could suddenly pull you into the 40% tax bracket, and that is a huge jump. Okay, it's not all doom and gloom, I promise. The 2025 budget did actually include some direct help for households. So for Section 3, let's shift gears and focus on the wins, the measures that are actually designed to put a bit of money back in your pocket and ease that cost of living pressure.
Right, there are some real tangible savings to talk about here. The government's providing about £115 off the average energy bill. If you're a driver, you'll be happy to hear the 5p fuel duty cut has been extended. Commuters get a little break with a freeze on regulated rail fares, and prescription charges in England are frozen too. But maybe the biggest one is that national insurance rates are being held steady. That is a clear win for 28 million workers, whether you're employed or self-employed. But that's not all. Here is where most people might get caught out. Let's move on to Section 4, your budget losses. This is where we need to look past the good news and dig into the hidden costs and potential traps that have been created by those frozen thresholds we talked about earlier. Let's make this really clear with an example. Imagine an office worker up in Manchester earning £32,000 a year.
They get a 3% pay rise to help with inflation, which is great. That's an extra £960. But because that tax-free allowance is frozen, that entire £960 is now taxed at 20%. If the thresholds had risen with inflation like they used to, a chunk of that raise would have been tax-free. This is fiscal drag in action, folks. It's literally eroding the value of your pay rise before it even hits your bank account.
And there are other little pinches to be aware of. The threshold for that high-income child benefit charge is frozen at £60,000, so more and more families are going to get caught by it as wages rise. If you use salary sacrifice schemes, a cap is coming in the future. And for all you freelancers or small business owners, maybe in London, that handy flat-rate home working allowance, £312 a year, is being removed from 2026. A small but definitely noticeable loss for remote workers.
So, with all these different moving parts, it is absolutely vital to have the core numbers clear in your head. That brings us to Section 5, the key numbers you need to know. Think of this as your quick reference guide for the current tax landscape right across the UK.
As you can clearly see, the tax bands are not the same across the whole of the UK. For England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, it's a pretty straightforward structure. But if you live in Scotland, it's a much more complex system with extra rates thrown in. This means your take-home pay can be very, very different, depending on which side of the border you live, even if you're on the exact same salary as someone else. And here's a quick pro tip for you. Given all these complexities, it's absolutely essential to check that your tax code is correct. You can do this really easily online using your gov.uk personal tax account. And get this, did you know? HMRC estimates that millions of people are on the wrong tax code every single year, and many are potentially overpaying by hundreds of pounds without even realizing it, so it's definitely worth a check.
All of this brings us neatly to our final section, getting expert help. Because, as we've seen, the tax system isn't getting any simpler, and the changes from the 2025 budget, while they might seem subtle, they have very real consequences for your money.
So it all really boils down to this one critical question. With things like fiscal drag creeping in and all these new rules emerging, how can you be sure that your financial strategy is still properly optimized? How do you know for sure that you aren't paying more tax than you need to, or that you're using every single allowance that's available to you?
Now, a quick but really important point before we finish up. Please remember that all the information we've talked about today is for general guidance only. Everyone's personal circumstances are unique, so you really shouldn't rely on this exclusively when you're making those big financial decisions.
For that kind of personalized, tailored advice, it's always best to consult an expert. To properly navigate the 2025 budget and make sure your finances are fully optimized, get in touch with the team at My Tax Accountant. They can provide professional help on this and any other tax questions you might have. Their number is 020-857-8531, and their email is info@mytaxaccountant.co.uk. Thanks so much for joining me for this breakdown of the UK budget.